The story opens from the perspective of a Zorvax soldier, marching through the ruins of Dregner 5 with his squad. They are confident, humans are weak, broken, and easily exterminated. Then, the first soldier vanishes. No sound. No struggle. Just gone. The squad stops. Scanners pick up nothing. Their advanced sensors show no life signs. Another soldier disappears. Then another. Then, in the eerie silence, a whisper comes through their comms. "You shouldn't have come here." The scene cuts to black as the screams begin. The wind howled through the ruins of Dregner 5, carrying the scent of scorched metal and death. Smoke curled from the wreckage of a downed Zorvax transport, its massive frame still glowing red from the plasma barrage that had taken it out. The bodies of its occupants lay scattered motionless, their thick armor torn apart like paper. Commander Zirak Varthon stood over them, his reptilian eyes narrowing. This was not a battle. This was a massacre. Another squad gone. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Psychral, muttered. His scaled fingers tapped nervously on the hilt of his energy blade. "The third in 2 cycles." Zirak exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the frigid air. "Survivors?" "None." A heavy silence settled over the Zorvax warriors. These were not rookies. They were the Dominion's finest, veterans who had crushed entire civilizations. And yet, against a handful of humans, they were dying like prey caught in a hunter's snare. Zirak crouched beside one of the bodies, flipping it over with a single clawed hand. The warrior's chest plate was split open, exposing thick, greenish flesh beneath. The cuts were precise, too clean for random explosives, too methodical for desperation. This wasn't war. This was execution. His comm crackled. "Commander, we've found something." Zirak straightened. "Where?" "1 click west. You'll want to see this." Moments later, he stood before the grim discovery. A single Zorvax soldier, strapped to the charred remains of a war mech. His armor was intact, but his helmet was missing, revealing a face twisted in terror. The soldier was alive, barely. His slitted pupils darted wildly, his chest heaving in ragged breaths. Zirak stepped closer. "What happened here?" The soldier's throat bobbed. They're not normal." Zirak's jaw tightened. "Clarify." "They're shadows," the soldier gasped. "We never saw them. One moment we were advancing, then. His breath hitched. "They played with us. Picked us off one by one. I heard them laughing." "Laughing?" Zirak's claws twitched. No, that couldn't be. Humans were desperate survivors, scavengers, fighters when cornered, but not hunters. Not predators. He turned away, ignoring the hollow feeling gnawing at his gut. "Put him down!" A plasma bolt sizzled through the air. The soldier slumped. Zirak activated his comm. "Full patrol units. We sweep the ruins." "Now." A mile away. Elias Voss watched through the scope of his rifle, his face expressionless. The moment the Zorvax commander ordered the execution, he knew exactly what kind of leader he was dealing with: pragmatic, ruthless, and completely convinced of his superiority. "That's the head honcho," muttered Corporal Sienna Drake beside him. She adjusted her grip on her modified plasma rifle. "Big lizard. Looks pissed." Voss lowered his scope. "Good. Let's keep it that way." There were only 5 now, 5 humans against an entire Zorvax war battalion. Their supplies were running thin. Ammo was limited. Food and water? Scarce. But fear? That they had in abundance. Not their own, of course. Theirs belonged to the enemy. Voss tapped his comm. "Sergeant Cole, status?" Cole's voice crackled through. "Perimeter charges are set. If they sweep the ruins, they'll get a surprise they won't forget." "Good. Make it count." Voss motioned to Drake and the others. "Let's move. We'll lead them into the trap. The hunt begins." Zirak advanced through the shattered city, his soldiers fanning out in formation. The ruins of Dregner 5 were eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of rubble beneath their boots. Buildings loomed overhead, shattered and charred from the endless bombardments. His instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. "Thermal scans?" he asked. "Negative," Psycrawl responded. "No life signs. No movement." That made no sense. They knew the humans were here. Then, a whisper crackled through their comms. "Not in Zorvax." "In perfect, chilling Zorvax dialect?" "You shouldn't have come here." Every warrior froze. Zirak's eyes widened. That voice wasn't from any of his men. A sharp snap echoed. A Zorvax soldier stumbled, his leg suddenly gone below the knee. He didn't even have time to scream before another shot cracked through the air, taking him in the throat. Panic spread. Warriors turned in every direction, rifles raised, searching for an enemy they couldn't see. "Steady!" Zirak barked. "Find cover! Pinpoint their position!" Too late. An explosion erupted from beneath them, shattering the street in a cascade of fire and shrapnel. The carefully placed charges turned the narrow passage into a death trap. 2 more soldiers were down. Then, through the smoke, they saw them. 5 figures. Human. Moving fast, weaving through the debris like ghosts. They fired with deadly precision, every shot taking a target. A Zorvax soldier raised his weapon, only to be tackled from the side. Voss drove his combat knife deep into the alien's throat, twisted, and let the body drop. Zirak's blood turned cold. These weren't desperate survivors. These were predators. The realization. The battle was over in minutes. The remaining Zorvax scattered, retreating into the ruins, dragging their wounded with them. The humans vanished just as quickly as they had appeared, slipping back into the shadows. Zirak stood amidst the carnage, his fists clenched. His warriors, trained killers, soldiers who had conquered entire planets, had been torn apart by a handful of humans. Psycrawl limped beside him, bleeding from a graze wound. "Commander, what are they?" Zirak didn't answer. Because, for the first time in his long military career, he didn't have one. The humans should have been broken. Starved. Hopeless. Instead, they fought like demons. And worst of all, they enjoyed it. His comm crackled. A single message came through. A human voice. Voss's voice. "Sleep with one eye open, Commander." The line went dead. Zirak exhaled slowly. For the first time, he felt it, the creeping, sickening realization. The humans weren't afraid of them. They were the fear. The Zorvax camp was a fortress of steel and discipline. Towering barricades encircled the perimeter, automated turrets scanning the ruins for any sign of movement. Soldiers moved in tight formations, their reptilian faces locked in grim determination. Despite the fortifications, there was an unspoken tension in the air. They had secured hundreds of planets before, crushed rebellions without effort. But this was different. This was fear. Commander Zirak Varthon stood at the heart of it all, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the holomap. A red dot marked every fallen soldier. Too many. His forces should have wiped out the human resistance days ago. Instead, they were the ones being hunted. "They're mocking us," Lieutenant Psycrawl said, his voice tight. He pointed to a section of the map where another patrol had gone dark. "They don't just kill. They choose how and when. They're toying with us." Zirak's expression didn't change, but his claws flexed against his palm. He knew Psycrawl was right. The humans had moved beyond ambushes and hit-and-run strikes. They had begun breaking the Zorvax piece by piece, psychologically, tactically, completely. "They think they can break us." Zirak turned to the assembled officers. "They're wrong." He tapped a command into his wrist console. The holomap flickered, revealing a new deployment pattern. "We're launching a full-scale sweep," he announced. "No more scattered patrols. No more small squads. We advance as one." Psycrawl hesitated. "Sir, the terrain favors them." "I know exactly what it favors," Zirak snapped. "And I refuse to let a handful of primates dictate this war." His voice lowered, lethal. "We end them. Now." The officers saluted and moved to relay the orders. Zirak watched them go, jaw tight. He had seen fear spread through armies before. It was a sickness, and if he didn't cut it out now, it would consume them all. The bait is set. 1 mile away, Elias Voss crouched behind a collapsed building, watching the Zorvax battalion mobilize. "Big push incoming," murmured Corporal Sienna Drake beside him, adjusting the scope of her rifle. "They're done playing defense." Voss had expected this. He had wanted this. "Good," he said. "Let them come." Sergeant Cole's voice crackled over the calm. "Perimeter's rigged. We can hit 'em hard, but not forever." Voss glanced at his team, 5 humans, each one battered, exhausted, running low on supplies. Against the full force of the Zorvax army, they shouldn't have had a chance. But wars weren't won by numbers. They were won by knowing your enemy. "We don't need forever," Voss replied. "We just need them scared enough to make mistakes." Drake smirked. "So usual then?" Voss nodded. "Hit them fast. Hit them where it hurts." The trap springs. The Zorvax column moved in a relentless tide, heavy boots crushing the rubble beneath them. They advanced through the ruined streets, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. Then the first explosion hit. The ground beneath the front ranks erupted, sending bodies flying in all directions. Smoke and dust blinded the ones who remained standing. Before they could recover, the second charge detonated, ripping through the ranks. Panic rippled through the formation. "Regroup!" Zirak roared, but the humans were already moving. Shots rang out. Silent figures darted between the ruins, picking off soldiers with terrifying precision. Zorvax warriors returned fire, but their weapons met only empty air. Their enemy was nowhere and everywhere all at once. A soldier beside Zirak dropped with a clean bullet hole between his eyes. Another spun as a knife lodged deep into his throat. The formation shattered. Zirak clenched his teeth, rage boiling in his veins. "Fall back!" The words had barely left his mouth when a voice echoed through the comms, human, deliberate, laced with amusement. "Running already? We were just getting started." Zirak's fists clenched. He turned sharply. "Find them! Kill them!" But his warriors weren't moving. They were frozen, scanning the ruins with wide, desperate eyes. That was when Zirak understood. The humans hadn't just attacked their formation. They had attacked their minds. Fear was setting in. And fear was a slow poison. The message? The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. Smoke curled from the ruins, the bodies of Zorvax warriors lying still in the dust. Zirak stood in the aftermath, breathing heavily, his rifle clenched in one clawed hand. Around him, what remained of his forces struggled to regroup, their ranks thinned, their confidence shattered. "Sir?" Psycrawl approached, his face grim. "They left something behind." Zirak turned. A single Zorvax soldier had been spared, bound, kneeling, a human combat knife embedded in the ground before him. The prisoner's breathing was ragged, his eyes darting wildly. "Speak!" Zirak ordered. The soldier swallowed. They told me to deliver a message." Silence. Zirak stepped forward, towering over the kneeling warrior. "Then deliver it." The soldier's voice trembled. "You think you're hunting us? We're hunting you." A deep, heavy silence settled over the Zorvax. And in that silence, Zirak knew the truth. This war had changed. The hunters had become the hunted. The Zorvax camp was silent. Not the disciplined quiet of a well-oiled war machine, but the strained, unnatural hush of soldiers teetering on the edge of collapse. Shadows stretched long over the barricades, their watchtowers scanning the ruins beyond. The air smelled of scorched metal and something worse, fear. Commander Zirak stood in the command tent, claws tapping against the metal table. The hollow map displayed their dwindling forces. He had lost another 50 warriors in the last engagement. Not to a full-scale battle, not to overwhelming firepower, but to 5 humans. 5. The sheer impossibility of it gnawed at him. "Sir?" Lieutenant Psycrawl entered, his expression worn and tense. "Morale is crumbling." They speak in whispers now. Some say the humans are spirits, death given form. Others believe they are demons. He hesitated. There have been desertions. Zirak's gaze hardened. He had ruled through strength his entire career. Fear had always been a tool, one he wielded well. But now it was working against him. If the soldiers lost faith, if they truly believed they were fighting an unbeatable enemy, the battle was already over. They bleed like any other, he said coldly. And bleeding things can die. Psycrawl's throat bobbed. Then we must make them bleed, sir. Before it is too late. Zirak leaned over the map, calculating. The humans thrived on ambushes, striking from the ruins and vanishing before a counterattack could form. His mistake had been reacting to them. Now, he would force them to react. Prepare the beacon, he ordered. Psycrawl's eyes flickered with understanding. A distress call? A trap, Zirak corrected. We fake a distress signal, draw them in, and when they strike, we end this. Psycrawl gave a curt nod and hurried out. Zirak turned back to the map, his jaw tight. No more fear. No more hesitation. This was war. The bait. From a rooftop overlooking the ruins, Elias Voss peered through his scope, eyes locked onto the Zorvax camp. His team lay scattered in the shadows around him, waiting. The enemy's movements had changed. No more patrols. No reckless sweeps. They were planning something. Then the beacon flared to life. A bright, flickering distress signal pulsed in the center of the Zorvax perimeter. Across their comms, an automated broadcast crackled in shaky Zorvax speech. Help us, ambush, humans everywhere, we can't hold. A trap. Drake scoffed beside him. They really think we're that dumb? Voss didn't answer immediately. He watched the positioning of the soldiers, their carefully placed defenses. They're not trying to fool us, he murmured. They just need us to care. Because if the message had been real, it would have meant prisoners. And if there were prisoners, that meant intelligence, locations, tactics, supply routes. The kind of information that could turn the war. Sergeant Cole's voice came through the comms. Call it, Captain. Do we bite? Voss exhaled. This was dangerous, but dangerous was where they thrived. We don't take the bait, he said. We flip it. The counter-trap. Zirak stood on the elevated command post, overlooking the false distress beacon. Every rifle was trained on the perimeter. His best warriors were in position, their nerves stretched thin but ready. The humans would come. They had to come. Then the first shot rang out. Not from the front. From behind. A sniper round tore through a Zorvax officer's head, dropping him instantly. A second shot followed, striking a power conduit and plunging part of the camp into darkness. Zirak's blood ran cold. They knew! Psycrawl bellowed. The humans weren't taking the bait. They were using it. Explosions erupted along the perimeter. Figures moved through the smoke, shadows in the chaos. Gunfire rattled through the camp as Voss and his team struck hard and fast. Zirak snarled. Regroup! Hold your ground! But it was already too late. The soldiers hesitated, their fear cracking through their discipline. Some fired wildly, unable to see their enemy. Others ran for cover, breaking formation. A mistake. Voss weaved through the confusion, blade flashing as he took down another Zorvax. He grabbed the fallen warrior's sidearm and fired twice, dropping two more. Drake and Cole moved in tandem, cutting down resistance before it could form. The humans weren't fighting a battle. They were hunting. Zirak roared in fury. Enough! He raised his plasma rifle, firing at the nearest human. Voss barely ducked in time, the blast scorching the air above him. He rolled, coming up behind a stack of crates, reloading smoothly. You're running out of bodies, Commander, Voss called, voice calm. How long before you start running yourself? Zirak's claws dug into his rifle. Cowards hide in the dark. Warriors stand and fight. Voss chuckled, low and dangerous. You still don't get it, do you? A single flare shot into the sky. A signal. Zirak barely had time to react before the real trap was sprung. A series of detonations erupted across the camp. Carefully planted charges sent watchtowers collapsing, vehicles exploding in a chain reaction of destruction. The Zorvax ranks dissolved into chaos. For the first time, Zirak felt something foreign creep into his chest. Not anger. Not frustration. Something colder. A single word echoed through his mind. Doomed. The fall. The camp burned. The Zorvax who remained either fled or fell. The battle was no longer a fight, it was a reckoning. Zirak stood amidst the wreckage, blood seeping from a wound in his side. His forces were broken. The humans had turned his own strategy against him, twisted his own strength into a fatal weakness. He heard footsteps. Slow, measured. Voss emerged from the smoke, rifle slung over his shoulder. He looked down at the once mighty commander, face unreadable. Zirak bared his fangs. Kill me, then. Voss tilted his head. Why would I do that? The words made Zirak freeze. Voss crouched beside him, lowering his voice to a whisper. You think death is the worst thing that can happen to you? He leaned closer. You're going to live, Commander. You're going to crawl back to your dominion and tell them what happened here. You're going to tell them about the ghosts in the ruins, the nightmares in the shadows. Zirak's breath came shallow. Voss stood. And when they ask if humans are prey? He smiled. You'll tell them the truth. The humans disappeared into the night. Zirak fell to his knees, staring at the ruins of everything he had built. For the first time, he understood. The humans hadn't just won the battle. They had broken him. The ruins of the Zorvax war camp smoldered in the darkness, sending plumes of black smoke curling toward the night sky. What had once been a fortress of power was now nothing more than a graveyard of shattered steel and broken warriors. Commander Zirak knelt amid the wreckage, his claws digging into the scorched earth. His forces, what remained of them, scattered into the distant shadows, too few and too broken to stand their ground. He felt their fear like a tangible thing, thick in the air, pressing down on him like a weight he could not shake. It was over. Not just the battle. Everything. A faint crunch of boots against rubble made his breath still in his throat. He didn't turn immediately. He already knew who it was. Elias Voss stood a few paces away, rifle held loosely at his side. His face was unreadable, his gaze sharp and unrelenting. Behind him, the rest of his team remained in the shadows, silent figures watching from the ruins. You're alive, Voss observed. That's new for your kind. Zirak slowly pushed himself upright, wincing as pain lanced through his side. His armor was scorched, the once proud insignia of the Dominion marred by dirt and blood. You think this is victory? Zirak rasped. You have won nothing. Voss gave him a long, measured look. Then he chuckled. Victory? He shook his head. We were never fighting for victory, Commander. Zirak narrowed his eyes. Then what? Voss took a slow step forward, the firelight casting sharp shadows across his face. Understanding. A flicker of uncertainty passed through Zirak. Your Dominion believes war is about strength, Voss continued. They send soldiers like you to crush anything that resists. And when that doesn't work, they send more. They think wars are won by numbers. By firepower. By fear. Zirak clenched his jaw. And you believe otherwise? Voss tilted his head. We know otherwise. He gestured to the ruins around them. You had the numbers. You had the firepower. And yet here you are. Zirak's claws twitched. Your tactics were dishonorable. Ambushes. Sabotage. Psychological warfare. You didn't fight like soldiers. Voss's smile was razor-thin. We fought like humans. Silence stretched between them. Zirak could still hear the echoes of battle, the distant crackle of flames, the wind stirring dust through the streets. Somewhere, a wounded Zorvax groaned in the rubble. I will rebuild, Zirak growled. The Dominion will return. You cannot stop them all. Voss nodded slowly. You're right. Zirak blinked, caught off guard by the admission. You'll call for reinforcements, Voss continued. And when they come, we'll do this again. And again. And again. His voice lowered, steady as steel. Until every Zorvax in the galaxy knows what you now understand. Zirak exhaled sharply. And what is that? Voss stepped closer, just enough for the firelight to catch the hard edge of his expression. You are afraid of the wrong species. The words landed like a blow. Zirak had spent his entire life believing in the superiority of the Dominion, in the unshakable might of the Zorvax war machine. But here, on this ruined battlefield, the truth stood before him in the shape of 5 battered humans who had brought an empire's warriors to their knees. The realization dug deep into his bones. Voss watched him carefully, then turned to leave. This war isn't over, Zirak called after him. Voss paused but didn't look back. No, he agreed. But you won't be the one to finish it. With that, he disappeared into the ruins, his team melting into the darkness alongside him. Zirak stood alone. The fire crackled. The night stretched endless around him. And for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to lose.